My name is Paul Nuki. I'm a journalist. I'm the Global Health Security Editor for the Telegraph newspaper in London. Very privileged to be here. Diagnostics Day 2025. I'm going to say a few words and then we'll pass on to our speakers. First things first, I'm dreadful at the pronunciation of names. There is no offense meant if I mispronounce names. It's partly because I'm dyslexic, but mostly because I spent a long time at the DevEx party last night. Diagnostics are the first step on the path to health. Without diagnostics, medicine is blind. But we as individuals are also blind. We're prevented from having proper control and agency over our own personal health without diagnostics. And that goes for people here and all around the world. When I think about diagnostics, I think about COVID. It's the first time that it really occurred to me. I say that as a journalist. You'll understand we're sort of short term. But in Britain, during COVID, there was a disaster. In early February 2020, as the virus was coming into the country from ski resorts, from football supporters in Europe, the British authorities ran out of diagnostic tests within a week or two. They simply couldn't believe it. They had not considered the need for adequate diagnostics, let alone mass testing, ahead of time. They'd stockpiled vaccines, admittedly flu jabs, but they had really had no tests. And more importantly, they hadn't developed the infrastructure to develop testing. So Britain stumbled terribly in that first bit of the pandemic. And it cost us dear. We'll be paying for it for many decades to come. The virus couldn't be tracked and controlled. Hospitals pretty rapidly filled to capacity. Lockdowns became necessary. And the economy all but shut down. Overall, that error, that failure to see the need to test, has cost Britain something in the region of 300 to 400 billion. It's hit living standards, it's destabilized our politics and led to a spike in populism. And that in turn has more recently led to our aid funding, our international aid funding, to be cut, limiting our ability to contribute to diagnostics around the world. So with that slightly bleak message, but I think an important one, let's move on to today's event. There's a full day. This current session will look at the state of the diagnostics gap. We will move on before lunch to diagnostics in women's health. There will be a high-level meeting on diagnostics after lunch. And then we will look at diagnostics tomorrow, the challenges we face, and ultimately, the next pandemic, what should happen before day one of that pandemic. So I want to push on now. Without further ado, I want to introduce the chair. I'll find Dr. Deo Adetifa. Thank you very much. Dr. Deo.
Well, thank you very much, Paul. Good morning, everybody. And very warm welcome to this edition of FIND's Diagnostics Day. I'll start off by clarifying that I am the FIND CEO and not the chair, because the chair is my boss, and I want to keep my job after the event, just in case. But we are here because, and thank you all for being here, because clearly you're all converted to the idea that diagnostics are important, and whether the importance of diagnostics became apparent to you during the pandemic, or it's been a lived experience for you. You do know that there is a challenge in terms of equitable access to diagnostics across the world, even if the experience of people who live in Geneva or along the borders or in my part of the world differ substantially. This session is themed or titled "Without Diagnostics, Medicine is Blind," which is a saying by Alan Meru, I think. And we hope that the idea of the session is to throw some spotlight on the current state of diagnostics gap, and to highlight the fact that even outside of pandemics, as part of aspirations for primary health care, as part of aspirations for universal health coverage, we've got a diagnostics gap that needs to be closed. And I believe strongly that the foundations of good pandemic preparedness and response, of course, it's quality UHC, quality primary health care as part of UHC aspirations, which again require that you address diagnostic gaps at that level. So in this session, we will hopefully elevate the voices of patients, people with lived experience, our colleagues in the civil society organizations, because we need them outside of us technical guys speaking in our echo chambers. We need to address the journey towards diagnosis for all requires an all of society collaboration. So we need to have everybody on board. And then we hope that we can discuss or cover matters of health sovereignty. Again, one of the immediately apparent or one of the experiences or lessons learned from the pandemic is, you had tests, you ran out of tests. Some parts of the world had no tests. And till the end of the acute phase of pandemic, still didn't test as many people as they should have. So the response to that are all of the aspirations we have now for regional and local manufacturing, and recognition of the need for all the players in that value chain, whether it's regulation, government, political will, and all of that, to come together to make that happen. And we will talk about a good example of that in the later session. So I'm not going to hog all of the time to myself. The idea is that I hope at the end of this we will have a really interesting discussion that hopefully will also inform some, we'll take back perspectives that will inform or drive some more catalytic action as we aspire to diagnosis for all, which is really what finds vision. And only mission is really in the populations that we serve. So thank you very much, and back to you, Paul.
Thank you very much. Okay, so without further ado, the first of our speakers, Dr. Abre Okreke, I think is right. Close. From the Mohammed bin Zayed Foundation for Humanity, it's going to set the scene for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Paul. So, good morning, everybody. My name is Ebere Okereke. It is pronounced exactly as it's spelled. People tend to try and make it more complicated than it is. So, it's a pleasure to be here this morning. If I hadn't turned up, Daya would have come looking for me. They didn't give me a time limit, so get comfortable. So actually, I will be brief. I thought I would take, I was given a brief told what to talk about, but I'm going to ramble a little bit because I think you have the whole day to look at specific aspects, and I want to just walk through the importance of diagnostics as I see them. And I'll start by first of all saying I work for Mohammed bin Zayed Foundation for Humanities. It's changed its name literally 3.5 weeks ago. We used to be reaching the last mile. And Reaching the Last Mile and the foundation has primarily focused on the agenda to eliminate neglected tropical diseases. And we have a fund at the moment that is aiming to eliminate onchocerciasis and lymphatic filariasis by 2030. That has been running now for a few years. And we don't think we are going to necessarily get there. One of the biggest challenges for that is actually diagnostics. Most of the neglected tropical diseases don't have diagnostic tests. We still rely very much on clinical assessment. And the diseases are neglected, the communities that suffer from them are neglected, and they're neglected in the sense that they don't have the clinical capacity where diagnosis relies on an individual checking out a patient's lesion and determining what it is. So the biggest barrier to elimination of diseases is lack of modern diagnostics that can be applied in remote communities, for example. And as a consequence of that, we're continuing to invest significant amount of money trying to eliminate these diseases, which if we could actually do it faster, quicker, you release more money into the wider health system. And in the current climate where we're talking about reduction, significant reduction in the fiscal space for health, every opportunity to improve efficiencies in the programs we do have is critical, because there is a cost, there is an opportunity cost that we have to contend with. So not only is diagnosis necessary for eliminating these, to detect and therefore treat and eliminate these neglected diseases, it is also necessary to ensure that they remain eliminated, because elimination and getting the certification, and some of you would have heard the countries that got certifications for elimination of trachoma a few days ago, and Mali was the first African country to eliminate onchocerciasis earlier this year. There's still a post-elimination surveillance that is required to ensure we keep on top of those things, and we do not have diagnostics for those. Then moving forward into, again, I'm focusing most of my reflections this morning on the current fiscal space that we're operating in. We need to plan much more effectively to make sure that the resources we have are optimized in how we deliver them. But how do you do that if you haven't got diagnostics to know what the true burden of disease is in your population? We're guessing. We have a lot of black box epidemiology that tells us this is the burden of disease in our populations, because we don't actually have the mechanisms to confirm what we have. And this isn't just about infectious diseases. It is as important for non-communicable diseases, diseases of the lifestyle-associated diseases, as they're so-called. I'm not so sure how much of it is actually lifestyle choices. Sometimes people don't have the opportunity to make those choices. But we don't actually really know what the burden of a lot of the diseases that we are planning for truly are, because we don't have diagnostics. We talk about universal health coverage, and Dio already touched on the fact that there's no universal health coverage, there's no primary health care, comprehensive primary health care, without the capacity to diagnose the diseases that hopefully the diagnosis could have told you are in the priority in those communities. And then we move on to emergencies. How are you going to detect case 0 if you don't have the diagnostics? And we're always, because I'm always challenging CEPI about their 100-day mission. I said, your 100-day mission doesn't start until we've got the diagnosis. And so if we're not investing in the diagnosis, your 100-day mission could be 365 days because of the lead-up time to actually getting the clock ticking. So whether we're looking at routine healthcare, we're looking at neglected diseases, we're looking at emergencies, diagnostics are central. And if we don't address this the same way we talk about vaccines, we talk about therapeutics, we will always be playing catch up. And I think that is as important. It is as important that we talk about the essential diagnostics list as we talk about the essential medicines list. Most of us are very comfortable with what's in the essential medicine list. Most of us are less clear about what is in the essential diagnostics list. And so in health planning, we should expect that as your national health plan, and it is more and more important, I'll keep stressing national government ownership of the responsibility to plan for their own health priorities, particularly now that we don't have the luxury of funding. You need to ensure that you know what you're planning for, and your health plan, I don't know about you, I look at a lot of national health plans. I actually have a Google search alert to tell me any country publishes a health plan, I go have a look at it. I'm yet to find one that is very clear on what its diagnostic priorities are for investment. I've not seen one. If you do see one, please send it to me. I would love to meet that health minister. We go from old diseases to modern diseases. We're still reliant on old diagnostics can I ask anybody who knows how we're diagnosing syphilis these days? Still the old tests, predominantly. Still the old tests. Tuberculosis is still reliant. Yes, we have had the, the gene expert, which was great. It helped, but we are still reliant on old technology for these. And but there is an opportunity. We talk about innovation. The foundation I work in, those of you who know the UAE, they like technology, and there is no second sentence without generative AI mentioned. I'm actually starting a course, so I actually know what generative AI is. But we are very clear that there are opportunities to use technology and the new technology to make diagnostics more efficient, more accessible, more portable, and actually not just to produce the results, but then to be able to use that data to plan, whether it's investment, whether it's system development, whether it's actual therapeutics that you then need subsequently. But again, we talk about generative AI a lot, but I'm not seeing that much investment in near-patient diagnostics, for example, because we need to recognize that a health system that requires people to travel to a facility that may be difficult to access, that requires them finding childcare, that requires them taking a day off work, is always not going to be able to meet the needs. And we know that there is a potential for new innovations where we start the question from the patient. What does the person in the community need? How do we make sure that whatever we're developing is accessible and acceptable to those individuals? And that requires that we talk about diagnostics to the community. Not just about, we're getting better at talking about accessible medicines and formulations of medications so that people are willing to take. Again, my clinical background was in tuberculosis, and we used to hear rhetoric a lot about, what did we use? Non-compliant patients. I always dislike that because it's not a fair description. Have you seen the size of a tablet of rifampicin? And then patients are expected to take sometimes 8, 16 of those a day. So we have actually started looking at the formulation of medicines to make sure that they're actually palatable and tolerable by patients. We also need to take the same question with diagnostics. And I will make I will divert personally to make a personal appeal if there's anybody involved in the development of mammogram equipment. Can you please talk to women? They are very uncomfortable. And that will take me, there is a session on gender and diagnostics, so I won't go into that, but everybody that knows me that knows that that's my platform, I get on it. Women are not represented in the conversation about diagnostics. They are the ones who make the decisions for families most of the time on what investigations to seek, and they are also have specific needs, and it is my experience that the most uncomfortable diagnostic options are for women's diseases. We need to change that. Okay, but how do we advocate? How do we advocate for investment? We need to move from preaching to the converted. You all are here because you already believe in what we're talking about. You know diagnostics are important. You know that there's work to be done. You are part of the solution, and this is great. I come to Find Diagnostic Day every year that I'm at WHA, and it's great. But these conversations need to be happening in different spaces. And what we need to move away from is scientists talking to scientists, policymakers, policy advocates talking to each other. And we need to actually go out there and engage with communities to understand what they need and then translate that message and engage with politicians. And I've always said that the most effective advocate for anything is the electorate. And we need to inform that electorate so that just as we get them to campaign for access to medicines, that they also campaign for us, supported by us, for access to diagnostics. They need to hold their leadership to account. Now, as I work for a foundation and a philanthropy, and I should stress, Mohammed bin Zayed Foundation for Humanities is the private philanthropy of His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, who is the president of the UAE. So it's his private money that I get to spend. It's nice. What most philanthropists can do is catalyze innovation. They can put money in the early phase of development when it might be too risky for commercial investors. But for them to do that, they need to understand the need and the potential. So we need organizations, institutions like FIND to tell us what's in the pipeline, what's the need, what has potential, and what needs that catalytic investment to get it to scale. So, I'm wrapping up. But like I told you, I've checked my letter. They didn't give me a time limit. So we need FIND, we need academic institutions, we need the private sector, commercial manufacturers to work together with the frontline, with the community, to prioritize addressing these urgent needs for accessible diagnostics to inform our priorities and to address the diseases that we already suffer from. And I'll thank FIND again for inviting me, and I hope that I've rambled around enough to give you a few points to think about for the rest of the day. Thank you very much.
Well, that's a fantastic opening there and a scene setter. I've got two things to take away from that. First, I'm going to get a journalist on our staff to look through all the national plans for diagnostics, and we can have a sort of league table of shame. And second, on the gender examinations, as a victim of a recent prostate test, I can't. I'm not going to agree with you. Okay. Any offers? Okay. So our next speaker from the Ministry of Health in Egypt, Dr. Hatim Amir. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, my dear brother, Dr. Michel, always wonderful to see you. It's such a pleasure and honor to be here with you today. It's a very important topic, and a topic that Egypt has taken a lot of extensive and really productive steps to work with. I think that within the low and middle income countries, there's a lot of underserved areas. There's a lot of lack of access to diagnostics, and that is a major challenge, and it cannot be done nationally alone. The countries cannot do it independently. It has to be a very holistic and cross-border approach between different nations, between different institutions, between the governments and the private sector. Governments alone cannot do it. Private sector alone cannot do it. Civil society alone cannot do it. And this is why this approach that Egypt has taken has put together all of those actors together, whether the government leading the way with very strong political leadership, because again, what we've seen is that without strong political leadership, you can't really accomplish anything. And this is what happened in 2018 when Egypt launched its flagship 100 million healthy lives approach to initially and ambitiously eradicate hepatitis C. Egypt had the highest prevalence in the world of hepatitis C. And just last year, we became the first country in the world to receive WHO golden tier status on the pathway to eradicating hepatitis C completely. It's something that Egypt is very proud of, but we could not have done it alone. So we put together a very ambitious strategy. The government had very strong backing and support by our leadership. And we brought together the WHO, we brought together the private sector, the different diagnostic companies, the different pharmaceutical companies. We localized production in Egypt, which cut the costs down to one. So I will give you the difference between the cost of hepatitis C treatment in the United States, which is $25,000 to $1 in Egypt now, when it's locally produced. And this mass campaign, when we made diagnostics available, when we made the medication available in Egypt, we were able to screen 65 million people. 65 million people were screened in a mass screening campaign that also required a lot of campaigning, a lot of awareness raising, because people were skeptical at first. Usually, people are not always welcoming of what the government presents to them, but they saw firsthand that we're diagnosing, we're providing treatment for those that were diagnosed. We treated 4.5 million people that required to receive treatment, and not just Egyptians, which is something that we're also very proud of. Egypt is a champion country for equity and accessibility of medication to everyone that lives in Egypt, including migrants and refugees. And Egypt has a large population. We're 107 million people. And we have 10 million migrants and refugees living in Egypt. So this mass screening campaign from the ages of 12 and above reached out to 65 million people, providing treatment to 45 million. And again, I stress that without leadership, this would have not been doable. Without bringing the private sector, without bringing WHO, without bringing the World Bank, without bringing all stakeholders and community leaders and the different sectors within the government. So it wasn't also just the Ministry of Health and Population. It wasn't just the Ministry of Higher Education. It was a very holistic, whole of society, whole of government approach. So this is what Egypt has done. We're still very far from accomplishing what we want to accomplish. We hope to be able to fulfill SDG 3 by 2030. We're working very hard on accessibility in rural areas. We're doing a lot of public health initiatives. So we started with this initiative in 2018, and now we have 14 different public health initiatives from early screening and treatment of breast cancer as well. And Egypt had a very high prevalence of late-stage diagnosis of breast cancer. Around 70% of diagnosed women were at stage 4, and that was also now reversed because of the mass screening of over 25 million women. And that was done in remote mobile clinics that went to villages, rural areas. They were done through awareness raising about community healthcare workers, engagements, midwives engagements, a lot of also religious leaders engagements in the different rural areas. So I'm bringing to the table that nothing is really impossible if you have the will and the determination and the backing, and you bring everyone on the table, you listen to the different ideas, and you're able to implement that. Thank you very much.
Can we just say that Minister Hatton is also a fine board member, just to add his other add to description.
Thank you very much. I mean, it really, truly inspiring. The Hep C campaign in Egypt has almost exactly matched my career in global health from 2018, and I've followed it. The one thing you didn't mention is that in Egypt, I think they harnessed football crowds and advertising in football stadiums to get sign up to that testing. It enabled me to send over a very happy journalist to cover the story, actually. Yeah, so an amazing achievement. Okay, to our next speaker then, Dr. Mark Baron, patient advocate, and we're going to hear insights from individuals in this sphere. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you very much, Paul, and thanks to Fine for the invitation. It's wonderful to be here. Well, I cannot I'll obviously share a little of my experience as a person living with type 1 diabetes for 34 years, but also as a researcher and leader of the NCD's Forum in Brazil, an initiative that brings together public, private, and not-for-profit sectors in order to identify priorities and build partnerships and collaborations to improve the NCD scenario in the country. So I'll start by sharing some of the reality that we see in the world, that children with type 1 diabetes that are dying early, and it's not because of lack of insulin, actually. It's because of lack of diagnostics. They are not even diagnosed. And that's why they are not part of the statistics many of the times, because they just die before even knowing that they had type 1 diabetes. So, and there is another thing that is important, that many times people are not aware of what is available, where to find. So the facilities that will help them to be diagnosed and to identify what they have and to make actions from there. And how about decisions that are made without their participation? This is another critical point. So a very simple example. When it's decided, for example, a glucometer to be provided with strips for people living with diabetes taking insulin, many times the lancets are forgotten. So how can they measure without lancets? They didn't participate in the decisions. Or also very common, and please pay attention to that next time you make this decision, and also please include people living with the condition in the decision. A lancet that is cheap is the one chosen to be procured because it fits the budget. The only problem is that that lancet destroys the finger. For this reason, the ones living with the condition who would need to measure their blood sugar will decide to measure as least as possible to avoid the pain. Thus, living with the condition must be a goal, a priority for being someone with living the condition and co-deciding what is being incorporating or the policies developed in the country. I would also like to share that over 10 years ago, real life survey in the US showed that among the technologies, the different technologies were reduced HbA1c the most was not insulin pen, was not insulin pump. It was actually insulin sensor. So diagnostics are key for anything. So so in this case of insulin sensors, it shows like a film, not as a picture that you have when you use a glucose meter. So which allows you to make decisions before you're getting low or you're getting high in terms of blood glucose. And this makes a huge difference, obviously. It is a changing paradigm. And due to my 34 years living with diabetes, I've experienced the changing paradigms. When I was diagnosed, it was measuring the glucose in the urine, not in the blood. Then it changed it into glucometers. And then, obviously, now we have sensors available. Unfortunately, to very few people. It is something that we need to work on still. And, well, in the past, when I was on still glucose monitoring, so doing finger sticks, I use it to measure 12 times a day in order to keep my HbA1c the way I wanted it to be. And obviously, it was not as good as using a sensor, still measuring 12 times a day. So who can have access to 12 strips a day? Nobody, right? And who will be willing to also to prick the finger 12 times a day? So I've been wearing a glucose sensor for 20 years now. And what also surprised me was that at that time when I started, it was very rare. Nobody else. So I was the first or the second person in my country wearing a glucose sensor. But later, so about 10 years ago or a little bit more, one company brought to the market a glucose sensor that was cheaper than their competitors, than their previous competitors. And this changed a lot this scenario. So glucose sensors became much more popular worldwide, giving access, being affordable to many more people, and also being incorporated by many countries, the therapy with glucose sensors. Unfortunately, as I said, still today, very few people have access to glucose sensors. So, but I also like to bring some other examples of diagnostics. So in Brazil, equipping primary healthcare, we have been talking a lot about primary healthcare here these days, and the role of primary healthcare of changing the scenario of NCDs, and I agree completely. It is key. And in Brazil, in some parts of the country where we tested the use of point of care for HbA1c and also equipping them with new strategies for measuring blood pressure, changed completely. So the potential of primary healthcare to truly make a difference. So for example, in some regions, HbA1c was reduced 1% after incorporating point of care there. And for blood pressure, 3 to 6 times more people reaching the target after those changes. And as a consequence, over 10% of the reduction in infarctions and strokes due to these improvements. So, and still about primary healthcare and to accessibility of diagnostics, can we accept that only 10% of people with kidney disease are diagnosed? Can we accept that also around this number of people with dyslipidemia are diagnosed, and then we wait for late stages when those conditions are complicated, when people are having heart attacks or having strokes, then we pay attention to that? So no, that's why in Brazil we are advocating to incorporate point of care to be able to measure lipids, to be able to measure creatinine, to be able to measure HbA1c in the entire country through primary health care, through point of care in this space. And we have published already some studies on cost effectiveness. So if you are, in case you are in doubt and want to know more, I'll be happy to share more about that. So I would like then to close with some messages here. So first of all, it's obvious that we still need to negotiate and work in partnership with industry. A reduction in costs increases dramatically access to people living with the condition, to the self-care monitoring, but also the diagnostics closer to their homes, and the possibility of procurement by health systems. So, and health systems need to be people-centered. And people living with the conditions that will be impacted by the diagnostics decisions need to be part of the table where the decisions will be made, meaningfully engage with voice and vote power. And yes, primary healthcare is the right place to improve the NCD scenario. So please don't blame people living with the condition or healthcare professionals for not achieving biomarkers targets and health goals if they are not equipped with tools to diagnose, monitor, and adjust therapy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. A passionate advocate there. Thank you. Two takeaways, really. The points about the patient experience and the patient focus is just so important. And I thought you really brought that out. And also the point about cost, we heard it again in Egypt, the lower the cost, the more of these things are out there. And from the gentleman who runs a company producing diagnostics, I'm sure that creates a market, these mass markets for business, because money does talk. Now, Beatrice has just told me, and I've forgotten, but there's a soon to be a find report out on HbA1c. Yeah. Okay, so our final speaker for this part of the session, Olivier Nagu from Impact Santé, Insights from Civil Society. Thank you, Olivier. I'll just take this slot out of your way.
Merci beaucoup. Bonjour tout le monde. Oui, oui, un tout petit peu. But I'm from Cameroon. We are bilingual, so we speak both languages. Yes, thank you. Okay. Yes, so my name is Olivia. I'm based in Cameroon, but I coordinate a civil society organization, a global network of civil society organization to eliminate malaria. It's called CS4Me. And I'm happy to see many of our champions and colleagues in the room from Zambia. So I just want to talk quickly about some of the key points that we have as civil society concerning diagnostic. We are seeing issues around fragmentation of diagnostic across diseases. We primarily work in malaria, and sometimes we meet with community health workers who have malaria tests, rapid diagnostic tests for malaria. And when the test is negative, they don't know what to do. And they also feel pressure from families, especially caregivers, to do something to the children who are sick, or to even give malaria treatment, even if the test is negative, because they say you have to give something. So this is a big issue, and we really feel like there's a need to really shift that paradigm and have a more integrated, a more efficient, and a really more people-centered diagnostic approach, especially at the community level. Because in most in our countries, the first step of care happens at the community, in the home, in the family. That's where the first decisions are being made. It's not at the hospital. We unfortunately go to the hospital when it's sometimes too late, when we have tried everything at the community level and it has failed. That's when you have most people going now to the hospital, and also because the hospitals are very far away in most of the remote communities. So the first decisions are being made at home, at the community. So it means that if you have a strong primary healthcare system, a strong community system that is strengthened, we are going to save more life very quickly, timely, but we are also going to be able to save a lot of resources, energy, time, treatment, etc. If you can recenter the diagnostic approach at the family level and at the community level. So we also believe that it's important, like I said, that we have a healthcare system and a community system that are really equipped to detect not just one but multiple conditions as much as possible, especially for all the simplest diseases that are actually killing more children. And women and men. So we imagine a system where we have those diagnostic tools, but that are also very tailored to the community needs, not to just specific disease, but that are really tailored to the behavior and the culture of the community. And like we hear from the previous speaker, we have to think about the patients, what they have to go through, and what will be most efficient for them. And we also salute Egypt, because Egypt last year was certified malaria-free. And when we read about it to understand why, we understood that they actually also put a lot of emphasis on getting the right diagnostic, not only in Egypt, but also across the borders. with the refugees from Sudan and other countries. So they have very strong testing even now to prevent the insertion of malaria. So we really salute Egypt for that effort. So the reality is that our current system really plagued with major diagnostic blind spot, especially in areas that are under-resourced. We do have thousands of communities, especially in the most remote area, in the rural area, where there's no health centers, that completely rely only on community health workers with the tests or tools that they have in those villages to ensure that those communities have some type of access to diagnostics. So civil society organization, we think the role of civil society are very crucial because they are the gaps between the health system and those communities. They are the bridge, and they are present where the health system is not present. So we really think that it's important to involve them because they will be able to identify the gaps and advocating for resources, for solutions, and also resources for those community in need. For example, right now in the Congo DRC, civil society organization in the Goma provinces are actually the ones that are sending information around the type of population, the size of population growing, the need of the refugee, the need of even the local populations that have no access to diagnostic or treatment. So it's really important to work with those organizations, whether it's DRC, Niger, or Sudan, or all the countries that are in conflict. So the question we ask ourselves is that, are we going to continue to perpetuate a system that unfortunately leaves some of the most vulnerable behind? Or are we going to come together, work with all of you to demand changes? And the answer is clear, because we think we need to really enhance diagnostic success for true integrated and person-centered care, particularly in this time where we need to be more efficient with the resources that we have. We need to save the resources that we have. We also need to save and care for the precious, now we call it the precious treatment that we have. We can no longer, we cannot even afford to waste those treatments. So we have to use them for the right diseases, because soon we're going to even run out of those treatments. So it's really urgent. I know every year there's Diagnostic Day, but this year is even more important than ever before to come together and really ensure that diagnostic will be at the forefront. And we have to make sure we have the right diagnostic in order to have the right treatment and to save many lives really timely and quickly. The last point is that, we don't have a lot of time. Many of those diseases develop very quickly. Malaria, in 48 hours, you go from simple to severe malaria, and many other diseases is the case. So we have a timing issue. If we get the right diagnostic early, we save life. If we don't get that diagnostic early, we are losing life. And I think that's why today, unfortunately, we still have more than 600,000 deaths from malaria worldwide, and those are only the deaths that are being recorded in the health system. So I'm not even talking about the number of deaths that we have at the community system where there's no health system. So together, let's work to harness the power of civil society to drive those changes, to ensure that we leave no one behind, to ensure that we come together and we make a difference to improve the healthcare outcomes of everyone. Like I said, the time for change is now, because we are in a very critical period where we are going to lose a lot of lives if we don't have the most efficient approach with the limited resources that the world is going to have. So we are looking forward to work with all of you collectively, and to what others have said, include civil society. I mean, not include, because we are including ourselves. It's our health, it's our issue. So we are including ourselves, but we want to make sure that we raise more awareness. And I'm happy to report that now we are now working very closely with politicians, with parliamentarians who are accountable to us. So we are holding them accountable now for health issues. So we're working with coalitions of parliamentarians on TB, malaria, HIV, and health to ensure that in our national budget, there is lines for diagnostic investment. And it's true that it's not yet in the strategic plan, and that's the problem because they have to be in the strategic plan. But we are continuing to push for those specific budget lines for diagnostic, for the right treatment, and really for stronger community and health system to ensure that we can save more life together. So the time is really now, and we look forward to work with all of you. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Olivia. Merci. I can say that's about as far as my English French goes. It's a real achievement for an Englishman, that. But yeah, it's so important, that last mile, and it's always delivered by civil society and community workers who should be paid. And I fear probably workers who are most vulnerable to these huge financial cuts that are coming down. But the system will not work without them. It's as simple as that. Doctors are marvelous people, but they can't be everywhere. And we rely on this army of too often volunteers to do this work for us at the moment. Okay, so we're running just 5 minutes late. We've made 5 minutes up, but we're going to have a panel discussion now, and we're going to consider the subject of addressing access through regional manufacturing. Such an important piece. Well, I think you're on the panel. I've got Michelle. I would never forget you. Okay, so let's take up the panel. Dr. Dio, CEO of Find. If you take a seat. Dr. Michelle Sidibe.
Don't say that.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Zubir Tablu. Okay. So.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Paul, and thanks to the speakers who spoke in the first session. I've had many things that are music to my ears because they're very much aligned with what Find aspires to do and the approach that we, of course, want to take, even the changes that are happening in the global health space. More importantly, listening to country examples from our board member from Egypt, of course, delivers a testimonial of what I mentioned earlier about the need to have all of society approach to addressing diagnostic gaps. And part of what this panel is about is taking the bit about local manufacturing or regional manufacturing. We've learned about the dramatic consequence of Egypt domesticating manufacturing of antivirals for hepatitis C. So the question is, what can we do for regional manufacturing? How can we leverage the expected change in price, the expected gain in access, and access especially by the most vulnerable? So we are going to speak now in this panel the examples from Algeria in terms of glucose strips manufacturing. So I'm sure that Mark will be happy to hear a bit about what's happening in terms of glucose strips manufacturing. So just as he said earlier, glucose strips are not accessible to everybody, and there is now an upsurge or near universal uptake of continuous glucose monitoring in more endowed parts of the world. What that actually means is that the resource-constrained parts of the world who depend on external sources for glucose strips manufacturing will still find themselves, as the English say, up a creek without a paddle, because manufacturing will swing to production of CGMs rather than glucose strips. And we need to be scanning the horizon to take proactive steps to deal with that. So part of our aspirations working with all of you is that, these countries that we serve should not just be consumers of tools or diagnostics innovation, but should be part of creating the solutions and of course, owning the solutions as well, because that's the only way they work at scale, as we've heard from Egypt. So I will go very quickly to our colleague here, Zubir Tablo from Vital Care, to tell us a bit about how the involvement of Vital Care in sort of Algeria's proactive steps to address the issue of glucose strips manufacturing, to close the diagnostic gaps for diabetics, and of course even the monitoring and continued care gap for diabetics in Algeria. And then following, I will ask my big brother, Dr. Sidibe, to speak about, to react to what Zubo will say, because obviously there are aspects of regulation and government facilitating this process that are required. And he, in his role as the special envoy for the African Medicines Agency, would have some useful insights to share in that regard. So over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. My intervention is just more to tell the story than to challenge everyone. I have a very good insight. I was very interested by Mark Baron's intervention also, because we aren't specialized in diabetes. But just for me also, the aim is not to give affordability to strips, but because Algeria is one of the most lucky health system where all chronic diseases are reimbursed, fully reimbursed. That means it's not a problem of affordability, but it's a problem of right utilization and optimization of resources. Since 50 years, every chronic disease is reimbursed, and for long years, long decade, it was only export business, meaning big pharma or only exporting finished product, and such amount, the market reached more than $5 billion of import. Where we know that Algeria system is revenue is 99% coming from hydrocarbons export, then we are depending roughly about the variation of the price. And in 2015, the invoice for import of strips was more than $250 million. Then the government said, stop, we need absolutely to reduce this. And they imposed some rules, and it was really successful because they challenged every exporter, which means importer from our side. And I was importer of some of big pharma strips. And then they imposed them to localize the production in Algeria. And they asked us to fully commit with the suppliers, with big pharma, to travel and to work on localize anything, ever with 20% integration. They can say it will be okay, and then we can do, and we can think of something progressively increasing. And we discussed longly for, I think, more than 2 years with some farmers, and it was said that it was very high innovation, technology, very big investment. We have only one plant in the world, and it's very, very complicated. In 2016. Then we reached a South Korean company, and we discussed along with them. We made an agreement. Government helped us because we said we cannot jump from only import finished product to a fully integrated system, but we need to have a progressive integration. We can start by import the sheet and just make the cutting, which is very primary integration, and then we can commit in 2 years to have the full integrated system. And we get the green light from government. We signed an agreement in 2017 with these partners with a commitment to reach 70% integration rate in Algeria. And we started, at that time, we were second manufacturer to launch this activity. And we reached, it was 15% market share. The market at that time was, the price was $24 for vials, for each vials, which was fully reimbursed by the government. And 2 years later, it was nearly $11 by vials, because they reduced the prescription in 2015. For just like a matrix to have a comparison, every diabetics, DT1 or DT2, have a right to have any, with no limit, strips, meaning all the mess that was happening. And because of big pharma with prescription, with marketing and promotion, encouraging the doctors to say, to be careful, just give maximum vials and maximum meters. Everything is free. All the meters are free also. And then we jumped from $250 million expense to $150 million expense per year. And with the integration, we were the second factory, and then there was another one. There we spent 3 years where we reach more than 45% market share. But the idea is not about market share for us. The idea is that we succeeded to integrate a fully manufacturing system of strips. We reached GMP. We were focusing on localizing and to have the full and the last standards in terms of manufacturing. Then we get certified ISO 35458. We have the GMP standards also, and we are working on the CE mark to enlarge our portfolio of customers for export activities. And we did 2 clinical trials for our product that was compared to big pharma, which was highly innovative at that time. And we succeeded to have a very small variation of less than 5% to be with big pharma strips. And with that, we succeeded to, to reduce the invoice. And now we, since 1 year, we launched the first, it was, I would say, traditional, but it's innovation in Africa, because we launched an application, smart application that can enhance the profile, glycemic profile for the diabetics, where with the same strips, the same meter, we added the Bluetooth, puce, and then it can automatically synchronize all the measurement with the application and allow the doctor to have exact glycemic profile with all other indicators of variation, and so that are very helpful in addition of HbA1c, of course. And with this, we can enhance the stability of the diabetes patient, and we can this enhancement can reduce the invoice for the government, and can finance insulin reimbursement for other new generation of insulin. Okay. That's why the win-win system that has been forecast with Algeria.
Thank you very much for that. It is amazing how business can transform this space. I mean, it takes fine detail accounting, but business people and businesses are absolutely vital in this space. Now, Michelle, tell us how we can get this going, not just in Nigeria, but right across Africa. What are the challenges?
Thank you very much, Paul. Let me just start by saying that I am very privileged to be here this morning. And I am very happy, and probably is the most important meeting in this whole setting. I've been a privileged person because I can say that when you had a 45 years experience in global health, and you have been starting in the lower level of community and trying to work with the people there and become Under Secretary General, Minister, and Special Envoy, you're a privilege. And when you're coming from areas where you were going to school without shoes. So I want just to say, reflecting on my own experience, one thing after listening to all of you, and it shocked me always when I am in these great meetings, it becomes quickly very technical. And when you have, you test people at the end and you ask them, what are the three things you're taking out of here? And to make a difference in what you want to do for diagnostics, it becomes difficult. So for me, the first lesson I want to share is that you have to know your these issues is not purely technical. It is a political issue. And if you want to convince politicians, you have 3 minutes.
Yes.
My experience taught me.
If you're lucky.
If you're lucky, 3 minutes, because to convince your former president to make sure that we use the numbers from your country in South Africa to break the trajectory of the HIV epidemic and reduce the price from almost $10,000 to $70. You were with me those days. It will not take you explanation of because he has no time.
Yeah.
So I think for me, the narrative need to be simplified. People need to understand. And that brings me back to my one of my experience at country level in Mali. It was in the middle of COVID. I was traveling and I was minister and number 2 of the government. I was privileged, and I said that is one of the most important posts I had, because it was opportunity to bring me back to reality. Bring me back after being Under Secretary General and others formulating a lot of guidelines and blah, 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 blah. But bringing back to reality. And being back there, and it was a shocking moment, meeting the mom of the young girls. I remember Alima. Her name was Alima. And she was sitting there. We're traveling to look at for the COVID issues. And she was completely devastated. And I said, what happened? She said, we walk 5 kilometers to the clinics with Alima, my daughter. And she was weak. She was high temperature, trembling. And she arrived there. Found a very dedicated nurse, but no test for malaria, no test for COVID, no test for typhoid, no test for anything. And this brave lady, who was just a great nurse, was just having the only tool she had was guessing. And then what she gave is a paracetamol and say, bye-bye. 3 days later, she was gone. So those are the type of issue we have to, we are confronting every day. So I want to say, as now in my new position, I just realized by listening to all of you, so no diagnostics, no diagnosis, and no diagnosis, no care.
Yeah.
We are just in the dark. And coming back to your point, which is very important, as a special envoy, when I was appointed to lead that one and to really bring regulation into reality in the continent, I realized first things, what is happening with diagnostics? 50% of our clinics don't have, or maybe more, Dio. So 95% of the product we are talking about are imported, at least in my continent.
Yeah.
95% of simple products or simple tests are imported. So the reality is that we have a fragmented market. We have a no regulated market, no harmonization. So and then we are faced with a falsified test in some cases, wrong products, which are even killing more our people than anything else. So I just said what we are trying to push now is to make sure that what we heard from my young brother from Egypt, and I was there starting with Gwilad, who was producing this product, $80,000 per person for 3 months to cure Hep C. I was the boss of UNAIDS, and I said it's unacceptable. And I brought Gwilad into the picture, and they said, no, we will go for voluntary licensing. So we look at what is the countries with the highest number of Hep C in our continent. It was Egypt. But Egypt policymakers said, no, we don't want it in that with that approach. We want to be able, you transfer your license, and we produce locally, and we'll produce at the price which will be affordable to 17 million people who could be affected by Hep C. So so I'm bringing that issues why, and what my brother said. Now what we are pushing is local manufacturing, but not local manufacturing like that. Local manufacturing with a vision of creating a hub, regional hub, where we can be able to really be not going on 55 countries and saying each of us will produce that diagnostics, which will not work. So we are now looking on market shaping and analyzing properly this test will be available where. If Egypt is a hub for producing that, why we don't tap on that and make sure that this product can be distributed and buy at a lower cost and produce with a volume. So those are the things we are trying to do now with the African Union and with the regulation. Time is flying, and I know you have been making a lot of speech, and me, I am talking as a politician, and I stop.
Well, Michelle,
Excuse me. I wanted to add one of biggest conclusion, completely aligned with Dr. Sidibe. But I would say that for any investor, the question of to invest or localizing or to take the technology is very important. But the market is also important. And why we succeeded? Mainly because the market was granted by the health system. Yes. I mean, you cannot ask for an investor to do any manufacturing and to ask him go out to market and try to sell your product. You can say we can take care of reimbursing this pathology, and we encourage you to take any technology to localize, and we will be there to ensure every investor that he wants. And he can be successful.
And Algeria has something else. Sorry, I've been privileged to be almost everywhere. So I think Algeria has something else which is very important, is their social insurance. So when they produce, a state is well organized to be able to take it, to distribute it, and to make it available to every single citizen if it's needed.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you so much, Dr. Sadevi. I can't imagine that there are many politicians who will not turn you down. And I would say the local manufacturing is not just bringing diagnostics to these countries, right? It is bringing business, it is bringing jobs, and it is bringing pride. And I think we've heard today from Algeria, from Egypt, where these things are made locally, there is huge pride, as well as local capacity. So we're going to open it up briefly to the floor, because we've done all the speaking. You've got all these experts in the room. Raise your hands if you've got a question.
Hi, I'm Tom Cerrito from Varo Bio. We're an American company. Thanks for everything today. So Varo is developing a biocenter platform. It's extremely sensitive semiconductor-based technology that has the sensitivity of PCR, but it delivers a result in 1 minute. It's extremely easy to use. We recognize that the pharmaceutical industry is traditionally hidden behind patents, and that has been a big deterrent to getting some of these technologies out of the America and Europe. We adopted a business-wide open source model, specifically to enable local manufacturing of tests. And so we signed a pledge that we will not enforce our patents. In fact, we're making all of our intellectual property publicly available and facilitating the transfer of those technologies to regional manufacturers who can manufacture tests for their populations. So we think that this is one way to contribute to the gap, and particularly the gap for new technologies.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, should we? I'll come. But a couple of questions there from people who haven't spoken. Can we keep them to questions rather than statements?
Oh, I'm sorry, that's a statement. Very brief. My name is Jutta Reinhardrup. I'm representing the H3D Foundation from the University of Cape Town. I want just to add, we hear a lot about the ready-to-go diagnostics, but it's also about having the research skills in Africa to really focus on having that expertise locally,
yes,
so that, ideas, innovation comes out of countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Lady there.
Thank you very much. So my name is Salma Tamam. I'm from Egypt, and it's in line with what you were mentioning. So I'm the founder of a diagnostics company based in Egypt, and we develop PCR tests.
Okay.
And it's a biotech company. If I'm allowed to add one problem to what you've mentioned, is that unfortunately we have lack of trust in African products, especially within the biotech region. So within 2 years of operation, today we are selling in Egypt, Sudan, and Kenya. But if I'm allowed to add, the biggest challenge amongst what you've mentioned is convincing the end user, even governmental entities, that our product is worth a trial. So I think in terms of efforts that are put out there, building trust in local products is a gap that we also need to fill, because it is, to keep us incentivized to put in the work, the effort, and the investment, we have to break this trust barrier if we're going to make it work. Thank you.
Thank you. I can say as a journalist, the failure of regulation in some countries, particularly India at the moment, for medical devices and medicines, it creates for us huge numbers of stories. Rabies tests is the latest one that is not working. So regulation is absolutely vital. And it's not in any way a criticism, I think, of business. Business will thrive and has the ability to thrive, but business needs regulation if it's to work well. Okay, more questions?
Can I ask you? My question is related to what you just touched on now, and it's to my big brother, Dr. Sidibe, because you just touched on regulation, and one of the biggest challenges is the regulatory process. We always talk about, especially when we're talking about local manufacturing of whatever it is, from diagnostics, therapeutics to vaccines, we talk about the large untapped market on the African continent, 1.4 billion and everything. But we know it is 1.4 billion people in 55 independent jurisdictions. So and with very wherein the standard of regulatory architecture and infrastructure varies from very, in its infancy to we now have some countries that are approaching maturity level 4, which is really encouraging. But I'm asking specifically as your role as the AU Special Envoy for the African Medicines Agency, about how you see the AMA actually helping to change that. Because we as recipients of the products need to know that the products are of standard. Manufacturers need to know that there's a clear process of regulation to ensure that they're licensed and able to reach the markets that they're interested in. So how will that happen? And then side question, perhaps not specific to this, when are we going to know who the director is?
Maybe.
Yes.
No, quickly, because I know the time is flying. Your point are all valid one, and they are very important point. First, we want really to push Africanization of research and development. If you don't do that, you're missing all the point. Because really, Africa future cannot be imported. That is my personal view. You need really to be able to also attract the best you have. They could be from diaspora, they could be from even foreign countries, but Africa need to really push research and development. That's first. Two, trust is critical. If we don't give a possibility to really build trust on our own startups and others, it will not work. But biggest problem for that one is what my sister she's saying. Without a proper regulatory system, today 50% of the drugs which are circulating in our countries are fake or substandard drugs. So they are just today I can say you have two criminals there. One who are just exploiting the system, they are a mafia and making themselves rich, and the others who are just letting poor people dying because they know that those drugs are not working. So regulatory system is key. Three, your point, and I stop there. I think what you are saying, we need not just to have a central agency, African Medicine Agency. What we need is a strong national regulatory bodies. And that will be one of the main functions of this African Medicine Agency, is to upgrade our national regulatory system so we have more transparent local environment. Without that, you will never attract local production. You will never change the capacity of our own industry to come. Three, you need necessarily to work on cross-border. We didn't touch to the cross-border approach, and without integrating our market, you talk about 1.4 billion. I don't see 1.4 billion now. I'm seeing Lesotho 1 million there, Botswana 1 million here. So I am dreaming to see 1.4 billion integrated economy, because that will make a difference in the debate and the way we also multiply. So the DG, I think from here, I'm leaving to Kigali because we will have to really select the DG. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Can I add something about the regulation? Yes, thank you, Dr. Sibi. I think that I agree with all of you and also with you that regulation is the key to build the trust with for the local manufactured product. But regulation is always, sometimes and mainly times, something that has been underestimated by regulation authority now, because it's medical devices. Very important. For us in Algeria, for a long time, for a long decade, we said all the regulation was for drugs and etc. Etc. meaning every medical something that is between the scanner and any object. I mean, but when we talk to and deeply in the topic, medical device regulation is very complex, absolutely complex, and the laws are completely complex. We see that in Algeria, we didn't invent anything. We just copy regulation, European regulation. But after that, it started in 2019, And after they put a deadline of 2 years so that every medical device manufacturer should comply with this regulation. But after 2 years, they realized that it's absolutely complex to apply all the rules, and they need education. And that's why, for example, VitalCare built educational program that has been concluded with all the stakeholders from regulatory department in the government and other players like competitors, big purchaser like a central hospital agency, so that we make awareness and vulgarize how the regulation, classification of medical device by class, risk assessment, and so on. So it's very important to consider the medical device, which is most of the diagnosis object, as a special regulation, not drugs and etc.
Okay, thank you very much. Now we've got one final question that has come through the cloud, and Beatrice is going to relay it.
So the question is, how can we scale the technology for CGMs to bring the price down? We need cheaper sensors. In South Africa, 90% of our people living with diabetes have no access to strips even, never mind CGM.
How are we going to get the price down? What's the key?
This is an important area of interest for FIND. It will involve convening industry, patient groups, and others to innovate and find something cheaper that works as well or almost as well as existing products. And then, of course, there's a market shaping bit that needs to happen. We need to defragment the markets.
Yes.
We need to have predictable demand so that, again, private sector are clear about what will be sold. And, of course, government needs to make policies either to create the market or to incentivize the innovation as well. But the good thing is FIND has a history of convening all the players, so government, consumers, industry, politicians, and all of that. And we hope that we can play that role even as we continue our work on CGMs and everything related to diabetes at the moment.
Thank you very much. So it's easy to end on a note of optimism about that. The pricing in markets, if you have a mass market, a big market, which Africa has, you see the light up in the eyes of the business people. And that, I think, is what you need to put in front of them. The dream of fulfilling a mass market. For them, it's business, it's profit. For us, it's lives saved, like the little girl you mentioned. So with that, we're going to take a break. We're slightly over. Go on. What? One quick question. One quick question in the corner there. We can't do.
Thank you very much. I'm from Lesotho. I'm Dr. Ranyadiyo Tubanjo. I'm listening and I hear there's a challenge of the strips, the accessibility. But I've also noticed that there's a challenge with the compatibility of the strips and the glucometers.
Yes.
That is a big issue in Lesotho. I think it's something which we should also look at. You have a glucometer with the strips. When you want to purchase the other strips when those finish, it's a big challenge.
So it's a compatibility issue.
Yes,
yeah.
it's a challenge. Thank you.
Thank you very much.